So do this.
Okay. Thank you for coming to the channel, John. We're doing something new. We're doing a live stream with spaces. So as people come on board, they can listen to our show live, and then in 2 weeks when we do the next show, we'll take your calls. So please follow us as we're doing these live streams. And again, the ones that are joining next in about 2 weeks, we'll take live calls. So you can ask John whatever you would like to ask. So again, John, thank you for coming on to the channel here. I want to remind the audience, make sure you hit the link in the description box of this video and all my videos with John. I believe this is part 24. And that will take you to his website, those links. Please sign up for those periodicals, and also sign up for a reading. I'll remind the audience to do that, throughout this recording. But thank you again for coming on to the channel, John. How are things going, and what would you like to talk about?
Well, certainly we have to talk about the what happened, I think, around 17th. I would say November 17th is officially the something I've been predicting since 2021, when I started to predict that there was going to be a Ukrainian war, that NATO was going to provoke Russia into a Ukrainian war. And I also started talking about that something that hasn't happened since the Cuban Missile Crisis would perhaps happen. And I called it the Ukrainian Missile Crisis. So that is now on since the 17th, since the president pulled a 180 on what he had decided when we were talking last, when Keir Starmer came, Prime Minister of England. Maybe it'll be England soon, but it's still Britain technically. Came in to with his little red sack full of targets, because he was going to push this idea of firing Storm Shadow missiles directly and deep into Russian territory, the territory that's pre 2022, the territory that is truly Mother Russia, been for centuries. Not the disputed states, the oblasts that are wanting actually to be a part of Russia after all the terror that they've been given by the neo-Nazi regime that has the puppet President Zelensky, the puppet Jew, to pretend, so that a lot of people keep writing me and saying, "Oh, but how can they be Nazis? They've got this Jewish president." Well, it's the powers, the deep state of Ukraine. It's not only our deep state involved, but it's also a bunch of neo-Nazis. So I saw this coming, and now it's here. Back then in September, a couple months ago, when Starmer was livid, angry at Biden for saying, remember we were talking about how it looked like Biden finally heard the message that Putin has been putting out for years: don't cross this line by firing missiles deep into our territory, because you haven't given the green light to Ukraine. That's an oxymoron. All the Ukrainians are doing is standing there waiting for the Americans to call them, or if it's the British Storm Shadows, waiting for the British to call him. And then they get the package, the code. All they have to do is type it in and fire it, and then everything else, the code was created by the Americans. The typing is the only thing they do. They aim the missile, and then the Americans guide it with their satellites and their telemetry. They guide it in bunkers in Ukraine, if not in Ramstein or somewhere like that. But this is literally, and then when it hits a target, it's a target that the United States of America has chosen to strike in Russia, not Ukraine. And if Ukraine has an idea, it's the United States government, this government, that agrees or disagrees with that target being struck. So the Russians have had enough of this. And they also have had enough of the situation, that very dangerous situation of these idiots that we have in Western European capitals, as well as in the Washington, D.C., who look at the maturity and uh, the patience and um, unflappability of the Russians as weakness. Their restraint, what an adult does in such a situation. He rather than men children and women children who are running countries that really have the maturity of a 14-year-old, Putin and the Russians are adults. And it's come to the point where they're realizing that they're going to have to respond, because the Western leaders think their restraint is weakness. So, the the it has finally happened that the Russians said again in a speech, just just after they responded. They responded quite originally by a missile that NATO has never seen before. The United States has never seen Russia shoot before. It's a new missile. It's an intermediate range missile that was fired. People are saying it was fired from near Astrakhan on the Caspian Sea in the Russian territory, but I think Ted Postal is a really good source that I quote sometimes on ballistics and this kind of stuff. He believes it was from the Baikonur, um, Russian owned, but it's in Kazakhstan. It's the spaceport where it used to be part of the Soviet Union, but they still have rights to fire rockets into space from there. And I think it was launched from there. So it was another 500 miles east than Astrakhan. And within a very few minutes, this thing it's a hypersonic missile. It's not an intercontinental missile. That's erroneous. You can't use it. I won't get into the technical bits of it, but you can't really suddenly make an intercontinental ballistic missile in all its stages. Suddenly you have to take a stage off and make it less, to make it not fly across the intercontinental range to hit the United States. Now, the Russians called the Americans, and told them, announced that this was going to land. It was going to hit Dnipro, as the Ukrainians call the city since 1990. I call it Dnipropetrovsk. I kind of screwed it up there. Dnipropetrovsk, which is a little longer name of this town. Important town in central Ukraine, industrial center, one of the most important industrial centers, and it happens to have this vast military industrial park, which was the target. And I imagine a lot of you have seen it, the footage from security cameras of this unbelievable thing that no one's seen yet. In fact, this is the first time that an intermediate range missile has been used in a war. And Putin, in his speech the day after, explained what had been going on. And I'm rushing out a new Hogue prophecy emergency report, which I shall probably have out either just before or on the day that NATO is convening a special meeting of all the leaders to discuss what had happened with this missile. Now, basically, I'll just walk you through what got us here. It all started on the 17th of this month, when Biden with the G20 was having a meeting in Brazil, and with a canopy of jungle behind him in his kind of wrinkled blue blazer or shirt, He made no mention of in the talk with the press about any orders that he had actually done, and I think I don't even know if Biden even pulled the plug on pushed the button on this, because still the no one's denying anything, but no one's saying, yeah, Biden ordered this. That hasn't happened yet. At least I haven't seen it yet. This is now days since, and so it's not clear if Biden is really running the White House anymore. Probably hasn't been for a long time. And that it's Secretary of State Anthony Blinken who's playing president, and the NSA chief Jake Sullivan, who are also he moves more on domestic things. Blinken moves more on foreign policy. Now, this is unconstitutional if what I'm saying is true, because we didn't vote for those two characters to be the president. It's doubtful whether we even voted for the character in chief, given that what happened with the election. We'll talk about that a little too. What happened with the election was that uh, I'm going to be writing an article about it, that I estimate now that we can see the different election results of many patterns through the elections of the last several elections. There's a certain average that people vote, like 67, high 60 millions for one side, and a little higher 60 millions for others, with that weird situation with everybody getting the ballots in because of COVID, which were rife for possible fraud, that Trump won 74 million, interestingly enough, which is higher than any president in history. And then Biden came in almost 82 million. I mean, can you imagine that Biden was such an exciting option for being president, a man who did scarcely got out of his basement for most of the election, already was showing signs of problems with his mind, that he won almost 82 million votes. Well, it's interestingly enough, the votes went back to normal down around for Harris came in at 67, 68 million, but Trump was or 69 million, which Trump came in at 74 million again, which is interesting. But what I'm saying here is that there's possibly, I would estimate that there's this anomaly of 20 million votes, a major jump beyond all other elections. And I'm starting to think that that's probably roughly the number of fraudulent votes that were tendered in 2020. Now, hopefully, I got proven right in 2000 when I predicted that Gore, if the recount of Florida happened, he would have won by a slim margin. Everybody freaked out when I said that. I said, "Oh, you're just a sore loser. You don't want your streak to break, blah, blah." Well, and it got counted the following year by political scientists and professors. They teamed up. They did the four possible ways to recount. They did all four of them. And Al Gore won all four of them. The largest margin was 75 or 76 votes. So Al Gore, my oracular instincts got it right. Al Gore was the president that was denied his presidency, and George W. Bush was an illegitimate president. And so, my feelings in oracular sense haven't changed. I read people, I feel the people that are voting. I don't know how I do it, but I'm now 15-0. I'm now 56 years on this streak since Nixon. I predicted Nixon would beat Humphrey in 1968 by a very small margin, which he did. And ever since then, now it's 15 times, 56 years, I have predicted the winner of the presidency, and some other weird things like who wins the. Now it looks like I'm starting to get good at the electoral vote. So I was on coast to coast for the election, and it was actually literally the first hour of election day, the midnight hour Pacific time till 1. it was a raging 24-hour windstorm happening up here in the Pacific Northwest, and the power went out again just 30 minutes before I got on the air. So I had to get into my van, go out into the wind, dodge the branches, and drive up a road a few miles to a friend. I had a backup with him, and he had a generator. So, but they had just enough of a generator to keep the heats going. So it was all dark, and we just had a lamp. And I'm here on his phone, his cell phone, which is charged, and we talked to America. And in that experience, what I basically said is that I talked to Tom. I think I said this also, but I know I told Tom Danheiser, the producer, on the phone, that he asked me a few questions, and I also added to it that I saw Trump winning the popular vote and the electoral vote, both by a landslide. And I started saying that actually earlier on the 19th of September. I started saying when I was on Coast before then that I was feeling around the turn of August into September that something had changed, that there was a big turning away from Kamala Harris as simply not being a serious candidate, and also hiding. And this time, people were not in any mood to have somebody hiding in their basement like 4 years ago, because we were all hiding from COVID. But now, she was also avoiding difficult questions, and what I was feeling was a stampede of millions and millions of men who said, "I am not going to vote for that woman." She lost the demographic of the male vote across the board: blacks, Hispanics, Caucasians, everybody. And a lot of women also didn't think that she was worthy of breaking that glass ceiling too. So it ended up being, Trump had over 5 million ahead votes more than she did. That's big. In fact, that's the biggest margin. They've been all so close since 2000. This was the first time when we really had a big margin. And so I said he'd win the electoral, he'd get in the 300s as the electoral college convenes. And that means, and I said between 310 and 320. Well, he came in at 312. So that was also accurate. I saw both House and Senate going to these kind of outside of my presidential predictions, but I also got these right too, that the Republicans would win both the House and the Senate. A larger margin in the Senate, and by a slimmer margin in the Congress, the House of Representatives. That also happened. So I came on 24 hours later back on George's show. Actually, it was in the 11 o'clock hour, an hour earlier. And he basically said, "Well, John, you did it again. You got it. This is what happened." I said, "Yeah, we're at now." I was thinking I'm going to lose one of these times. Every time I do it now, since the last several, I'm always thinking the streak has got to break sometime. This is becoming too crazy. I mean, I'm, I'm documented. It's not like these people that come in the National Perspirer or something like that. They come in and say, "And here's Joe Blow. He's been right, and so has his dog, about who's going to be the president since 40, 50 years." But where's I've got the facts. I've got the record, very clearly date tagged many years of doing this. And it's just funny how these people get all these attention. But, you know,
Well, did you see the meltdown of Alan Lichtman when
yes,
I mean it's just
what
like
a pathetic guy. What a
just
pathetic poor man. He was
and
one of the real, like, "Oh, this one just fell off the tree. Who's he?" And there's nothing more pathetic and I found out that people were talking about me to him. And he says, "Oh, he's a phony. He's not real." So, you know,
you know what, the thing is
but
he
I'm just
keeps
saying that he does something that is so pathetic in the prophecy field. "I was right, but they didn't they didn't do the right thing. The people didn't follow my prophecy. Well, it doesn't work like that. You've got to actually see that they weren't. I predict they won't follow my prophecy, and then you're right. But don't blame your audience. You're the one who's supposed to woo your way into their hearts and energies and see the future, not them. What a pathetic.
Right.
Yeah.
My understanding is that he only goes back eight. It was eight. Was it 8 elections? His model goes back 8 elections, isn't it?
I think it was around 8. I
I'm not sure how it worked. I think it was
yeah, well, this
8 elections.
whole idea about his 13 points.
And it wasn't even most of the predictions weren't based off of the 13 keys. He had to add a key to try
Yeah,
to correct the model because the
yeah,
model was breaking down.
yeah. Well, that if you change your model and then that it, oh, it's so much of this in the
Well, what's
Nostradamus
funny
field
is
too.
that he's claimed in the mainstream media as the Nostradamus of election prediction,
Wow.
and he has a total meltdown during
Yeah.
during a Trump election. And we've done a lot of shows talking. You were explaining the astrology of Trump and how Trump is really chaotic. And with chaos, it's hard to model. You have to expect the unexpected. And it was so obvious that he had such a bias against Trump and such a bias for the Democratic Party
Yeah.
that
Oh
I
yeah, it's
that
blazing.
that his
It's so out there that he can't even smell it. And you can't have a bias. You have to watch your biases. You know, and it's always funny, since I was 68, I'll get, as my readership grew, it's amazing. If the person I predict is the one they want, the majority of my readers want, then oh, John, you are the American Nostradamus. You are amazing. Okay, thank you. Be graceful, but okay. And then of course, if I pick like Trump, like then it's like, what happened to you? You used to be so good at this. But it's so funny how it's all, especially since 2000, I've really been able to, I'm writing, this is why I'm writing about it all the time. And so everything since 2000 is absolutely documented. So um anyway, it is kind of funny in this field that this happens. And the other one that got me was, I used to, I do, my way of doing it is through intuition. But sometimes I'll avoid reading any of the pollsters, the few that I respect, like McClatchy, and Atlas. And because they got it right, because they don't undercount the Trump votes. And they have a very tricky way of getting people to kind of say what they indirectly who they're going to vote for. Because there's so much persecution of people that vote for Trump. You can lose your job. It's terrible. This is not medieval times, but where you're going to get burned at the stake for voting for the wrong person. Um, but so he had a very clever way, this South Carolinian clever fellow he would say, well, I'm not asking you who you're going to vote for, but what are your neighbors? What are your neighbors telling you? Who are they going to vote for? And then, oh, well, God, they're all voting for Trump. Or the day before the election, I was in the Star Store in my town of Langley, a little village 40 miles north of Seattle on an island, Whidbey Island. And we're in line. It's a busy day, and there's this guy that I know, um, who he was saying, "Wow, well, what's going to happen? I wonder." And then he kind of did a hint that I think McClatchy would have understood. He said, "Yeah, it's getting such a hard time. If you don't talk about who you're voting is not what the rest of our blue town wants, you could get in a lot of trouble." And so what I said to him, without I just said, well, I just said, I know who you're voting for, and I'll tell you this: Trump's going to win a landslide, electoral poll votes, and I saw everything I've said here. And he kind of went, "Oh, okay," looking around, And in that line, This is another tell because this is a very deep blue end of Whidbey Island. You can always tell on the election years. If you're down here, it's all the Democrat posters are everywhere. And then about halfway up this snaking island of many isthmuses, it's a very long, thin island with two big bulbous ends, and I'm in the southern end. And you go, and then suddenly by the time you're going through the middle of the island, at suddenly dramatically all the things go Trump, 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 Trump after they've been Harris, 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 just like right about halfway up the island. And
Well, it's similar to New York in a way,
mm,
and in New York City, it's all blue. It's all blue,
mm,
right? But if you start going to, let's say, Long Island, it's
mm,
turning red, and
mm,
you go upstate, turns red.
mm.
You know,
Yeah,
it's like
and Trump
there's
had some huge audience in Madison Square Garden. He had a massive audience
no,
there. It
no.
was, I think, well, and that also showed in a lot of the blue states that there was a Trump wave there too. It just wasn't enough. It was just the fact that it even exists. I mean, New Jersey, yeah, what kind of was close to going red. And so anyway, the so we'll see what happens in the next 4 years.
Well,
Uh,
do you remember when we were doing the recording just before the election for 2020? All right, you may have forgotten the recording,
Probably.
but you made a prediction, and it's kind of prophetic, that what happened. You said that you weren't sure at the time who was going to come at that time we were doing the recording.
Yeah.
You said
Wasn't my
you weren't
officials.
sure who was going to come in, but you said that whoever does go in won't be the president in the end.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened with Biden. Biden
Mhm.
gets in, but he really didn't finish. So
No,
there's
he
a,
didn't.
there's a shadow, someone shadowing the whole presidency as he's in decline. Now, who that is, I don't know. But there was it's interesting to see that potentially the data seems to suggest in 2020 that Trump won. Biden gets it,
Electoral. I
but he
predicted
has
it.
the dementia that he doesn't really finish his presidency, at least
Yeah.
cognitively.
No, that's
And
what I predicted.
yeah, so it just it's interesting in how that all played out. And then what's your take? This whole interpretation of 45 and 47. When you take 45, you add it makes a 9. Take 47, you add two numbers, and it turns to 11. Do you think there's
Yeah,
a
I
connection
wrote about it
between
actually in
Trump and
my
9/11?
yeah, it's vibratory 11 out of 47. But here's the thing, I was just putting it in my special report that's coming out before Tuesday, where this is I'm not saying it's going to happen. It has a possibility of happening. There's been a move since these these back and forth, this escalation, which has actually turned now this war in Ukraine is officially a global conflict because the Russians made it very clear we are not. This is no longer a proxy war. We're fighting NATO. We're at war with the United States. And because they're the people firing these missiles, their missiles, and all this poor Ukrainians can do is just, if they're not getting targeted and blown up by us, they can, which often happens, they can push. All they're doing is just being the switch, but everything that makes it fly, and that also goes for the storm shadows. The British were so angry when Biden said no because they were starting to actually listen to Putin's threats, which are not a bluff. Um, tell that to Dnipro when these hypersonic six six kind of it's not they don't call these MIRVs. I mean they call it's called Orezhnik in Russian, which means Um, it's like not an acorn, but anyway, it's a hard nut, hazelnut.
So
And
was it multiple rockets or was it
oh
one
no, it was
rocket that went?
multiple. No, what it was is it came in, and then the cone took off, and then there was all what we would call the MIRVs, but they weren't MIRVs. Each one of these, there were six of them, and each of these six had six uh, fingers of fire that were coming down. I mean, if you look at the stills, that's not a exhaust from an engine. What you're seeing is a re-entry fire. They're coming in at Mach 10, 10 times the speed of sound. And some people actually were estimating when they looked at the 2,000 meter ceiling of overcast. I mean, God, if it had been a clear night, it would have been very biblical. I mean, you could suddenly see a huge glow coming, because it would have been coming down like that, like some biblical fire from God. Um, and so then there's that shot where they're all kind of coming out of from a farther distance than the original shot inside Dnipro, but outside Dnipro. And then you see the clouds there, and then suddenly there's this bright shum, 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 shump, 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 shump. But if you see it close up, those brilliant light, those actually, as Postal said when he was looked looking at the analysis, he said that this was the camera not being able to take that much brightness into its lens. So it must have been blinding to see it if with your own eyes. And then I also, in this thing, I not only have the movie of it, but I also have the movie with the detonations, which were thunderous. They were like really thunderous. It was apocalyptic. It was, and so what happens is the nose cone comes off, and these then come out, these six things, and then they opened up and then spread out, maneuverable, six in each. The industrial park was hit by 36 missiles. And it's a boom, 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 like that. And just, oh man, that woke people up. And I'm kind of hopeful about it. I'm hopeful. It's funny, after the election, I started feeling for the first time in years since the Ukrainian conflict began, I started feeling something pulling back. The dark cloud over the human race's future took a few steps back. And even though now, and I started talking about it in my Hogue prophecy reports. I might have even said it a phrase similar to this on our earlier shows. Right? I was talking about how in the prophecy business, you're looking at what's behind the door of the present. And then when you cross the threshold into that world being the present, then the insights are renewed and change because now, and long story short, this riddle may be our salvation. When you're actually on the threshold of the abyss and see it clearly, sometimes you don't step over it into your doom. The closer your doom comes, the potential is higher that you will step aside and let it pass. So this, I mean, this thing is now more likely than ever as far as odds of going into a nuclear war. Not just here. Then the biggest fear I have, my biggest healthy fear that I have, is not with the Russians at all, because I know them. I've studied them deeply most of my life. I've even appeared on some of their shows talking to 100 million of them on about 100 million hits for the 4 shows that I did in Russia from 2017 to 2018, January. Oh, 2019, actually, it was 3 years. And so there were 100 million hits, but the first show I did on New Year's Eve 2017, right after Putin made his announced address to the nation. It's their biggest holiday. And then I was on for 2 hours. I had segments on this 2 hour show with, I was the only foreigner. Everybody else was a Russian seer. Um, I have that distinction in my work. I'm told by my Russian readers that I'm the only non-Russian specialist on Nostradamus that is widely read in Russia. So I think the reason is that I don't have the biases of the Cold War. I don't have this hatred, visceral hatred of all things Russia and Russians. That's maybe it's because I'm being that I'm a Scandinavian, all Scandinavian extracts of the Vikings. And given that Vikings helped create Rus in Ukraine and in Novgorod, I have a lot of Russian and Ukrainian blood in me and white Russian blood in me. So, I am Ukrainian as much as I am Russian and white Russian and from the Viking connection. Um, so um, so so it's more close than ever. So healthy awareness and fear is also more closer than ever. This shot of this missile, and it's not going to be the last one, because these idiots are still not learning. Now, what's the response to this? Well, it looked like there might have been a pause, a few days, but now Kaluga has been hit by drones, but that's technically the Russians openly say, we can handle the drone attacks. It just does a little damage. It's not going to change us losing this. We're not going to lose this war. We are winning this war. And they are. It's getting really bad on the front. Yeah. And the Ukrainians are fighting like tigers, but they're running out of weapons, they're running out of bullets, they're running out of men, and they're running out of time to train people. So they're literally being thrown out there to die in about 100 hours. And they've exceeded 1 million dead in 2.5 years. The Russians are somewhere around maybe between 60 and 80,000 dead, which is no small number. Remember, this war has only been going on for nearly 3 years. We lost 60,000, 57 to 60,000 dead in Vietnam after a decade. So, this is a big war. And big fronts, big armies, lots of people, lots of casualties. But the Russians have learned from their mistakes in World War II not to throw their people at human waves. So ironic when you hear the press. They're not saying that anymore now. It's the Ukrainians that were, because if you don't train your people, they just have to come at you in a human wave. And it's Ukrainians that were doing this. So anyway, I've said this before, but so I am hopeful that the closer we get to Armageddon, the nearer we are to pass it by. And I didn't know that until this prophecy crossed the threshold of the present and was being fulfilled now. Then new things happen, new insights can appear. I I don't do anything. That's how it works. I don't um, have an expectation of us surviving this or not. So that's how it's done. Um, and I
My
think part
concern,
of the
my
reason, I'll close with this quickly on this point. Part of the reason why I can do this, and part of the reason why I am doing this, is I was initiated by my master Osho in 1987. He initiated me into this work, and uh, and the whole thing about it is this is an expression of the body mind vehicle in a space of reflecting the world, witnessing the world, being in the world but not identifying with it, watching identities are still there, but there's something that you soon find out if you've been meditating a while, truly meditating, that um, your it's all about identity, and you can't do anything about it but watch it. In the watching, the identity is no longer attached to you. So Osho used to say, uh, it's not important what you are witnessing, only that you are witnessing it. And and it the problem is meditation is your natural state. It's the most ordinary, this sacred eternity, this sacred eternal witness is the most ordinary thing that you have. You are ordinarily enlightened. But the problem is, um, everybody strives and searches for Christ consciousness and enlightenment and all that. And the problem is you can't do that, because if you're already this thing, then if you're searching for it, you're in a schizophrenic weird space. You're trying to find yourself. And like I'm right here, I'm going, or one of my favorite stories. I haven't done this story for a few years on the show, so it'll probably be time to do it again. I have this story. Um, Clark Kent wakes up in a cold sweat in his bed. He rises up, sitting on his bed, and said, "I've lost Superman. I've got to find him." So he gets up. He takes a shower. He gets himself ready for going to work at the Daily Planet. He puts on a tie. He puts on his fedora and his pop bottle glasses, and and then he grabs his suitcases. I've got to find Superman now, and he flies right out the window. Superman, where's Superman? And he's in the Clark Kent suit with the hat, like looking like a complete geek. And he's flying. He goes up to the Fortress of Solitude. Where's Superman? He must be here. He must be here. Why can't I find him? And he flies there and he flies here and there. Well, he can't find Superman because he is Superman. He's always Superman. Well, super, like Übermensch, Nietzsche's, it means beyond man, higher than man, transcending man. So we're all born in that state. We come into the world innocent of our enlightenment, and then the world, which by the time our parents and priests, politicians, and pedagogues get a hold of us, well-meaning and loving, they say, oh, well, you got to learn how to live in this world. But what they're really saying is, you've got to forget your innocence. You've got to put a coating called your personality over it. And because you won't make it in this world if you don't have an ego. Now, you don't drop the ego. The ego just becomes your servant. The ego is your mind. Your mind, you don't drop a mind. If you drop your mind, you'd be going, no, the mind is still there, but you're not holding on to it. You're not, and when you're not holding on to it, and then when it goes to its corner to be a servant of you, all your experiences and knowledge and stuff, how you've been educated, all these things, not just in this life, but many lives of collections of this. For instance, Osho used to say that enlightened people are not rare in the world, but enlightened masters are rare, because usually the trajectory of their memories and past lives is they were communicators and teachers. And so it's very rare to find a master who is fully enlightened, but is also able to use the mind and use situations with the heart to teach. And because if you, for instance, Osho was going to college to be a philosopher major when he became enlightened 21. And there was this guy in the Jabalpur streets who was I saw a picture of him. He was looked like he was an Afghani, a really handsome Afghani with a wiry beard. And all he did, he's sitting there, he's just laying there, lounging on the pedestrian sidewalk with a couple ducks around him and a big plastic bucket. And that's why they called him Mugga Baba. He's father of the bull. And he was illiterate. He never had an education. I don't even know how he got there because Afghanistan's far away. And all his teaching was to sit there with the bull in his lap. And what would happen is people would put money in, people would take money out, people would put food in, people would take food out. And his whole thing was just being very still in silence, just being here now with the bull. Well, so there was always people around him. So around the middle of the night, suddenly Osho showed up and he shooed all the people away. I have to talk to him alone. And when all the people were gone, Mugababa put down his bowl and grabbed Osho's arms and said, "Son, you've you've got to keep going to college. You have to keep," because Osho was saying, "I don't want to read books anymore. I just want to be silent. I know, I understand, but not you. You can do more than just hold a bowl like I do. I have no education. I can't read and write. I'm enlightened, but I can't help anybody except what I'm doing. But you." So it was Mugga Baba, like, you must keep, I know you don't want to, I understand, but you must keep learning how to be a professor and learn how to communicate with people. You will help many people if you can. So, so he did. And so I work in this prophetic field. This is what happens when meditation runs deep. Your mind starts working as a beautiful servant. It just, it there is no longer any strain. When I was writing before, it just suddenly, there it is, write it down. There it is, write it down. The more still you are inside, the more um, spontaneous energy and activity is attracted to you. Um, and it's just a knack of being, as the Zen master saying, neither this nor that. It's kind of a quality of, I like to call it ignore sense, where you're like, I'm watching you and I'm seeing the pictures behind you and the four screens, and I mean it's all there, but I'm not like, oh, there's the four screens and oh, there's the pictures and that's blue and green. And I used to be, you could watch your mind going, why does he have that over there? And so and you don't suppress the mind. You can't control it, because that would then be another layer of the mind trying to make you uh, control the mind. It's almost like you see this. This is the mind, and you want to take it away, and so you bring another hand to take it away and get it out of your system. But then, if you're a meditator, your perception of yourself doing this without being for or against it, just being there in the suchness of it. Such is the case that John Hogue is strangling his own hand. And then what happens is you get farther away, you see the bigger picture of what's going on. It just starts happening as your consciousness relaxes, and you notice that this hand and this hand are connected to the same mind. One is being bad, the other is being Buddha, trying to take it down. And when you see it, in the seeing of this being the same mind playing tricks on you, the seeing of it, you just be with it. It's not a goal. And if you just allow things to go as they go and come as they come, suddenly you drop that kind of behavior just drops. It's like the weather. One day it was a big living thunderstorm. Next moment you look up and the sky is blue and you go, oh, where did the storm go? Where did the anger go? Where did the fear go? Where did the voices of people that trained me to you should this and should that go? They only appear to be real because of our identification with them. And and so, that's the hypothesis, because this is a science. Meditation eventually is going to be the second wing of science, and it has exactly the same scientific hypothesis path as objective science has. The hypothesis is there something eternally inside of me that can and witness, and since everything that I am is transitory, I mean, now I'm an old man, and now I used to be a young man. Now, so this body, since I've been in it, has been changing at the get-go. It's been growing, and then now it's becoming seasoned and old, and in a good way matured, but may soon, it will start to get aged and disappear. But this thing that witnesses never gets old. It is always eternally new and young. It's so what is this? You can't see it because you are it. If you think you're seeing your Buddhahood before you, you're you're under an illusion of your mind pretending to be the Buddha. Um, so so this message is more important than, and I smuggle it into my work with prophecy often because this, what I'm talking about, what I'm hinting at, is the answer, is the thing that will step away from the abyss. Because you will see the abyss. If you see the abyss clearly, you will not cross over it. And just the theory is, Gurdjieff had the theory, as it did Krishnamurti, who I met. Gurdjieff died in 1949, so I never met him. And Osho, I am a disciple of Osho since even after he left his body in 1990. In fact, it's more intimate now without his body than it was, because where else can I find him? But it's the same isness or is notness that he was. Is also mine. It's also yours. It's everyone's. And it's completely ordinary. That's why we miss it. So these are what I'm talking about. Might for a lot of you sound like it's really off the subject, but this is the subject. Because if you start getting in touch with that, and more people in the world started getting in touch with that, it will change the gestalt. It will change the vibe of the world. And all it takes for these 8 billion people, all that is needed is 200 more people becoming enlightened than the average. And that will be enough. And if what I'm saying is true, we're going to see in the next few weeks, whether we're here or not, we're going to see it. And if these 200 are engaged, then what will happen is those forces of darkness that just want to take humanity into an auto-suicidal end, which they're doing. Their responses to Putin's responses are they want to escalate. I mean, now, what was the response to that thing everybody saw crashing in Dnipro? Which is it's a conventional weapon, by the way. It's not a nuclear weapon. So Russia doesn't need to use nukes to win this war. It can use these. And what may happen is, well, right after, there seemed to be a day or two of pause, but then immediately Kaluga got hit by the drones, but that doesn't count to the Russians. It's when the missiles are fired. The French have now said they want to put their Scalp missiles in. There's people in the German government that want to get the Taurus missiles in. So the pipsqueak idiots who are running Europe and our demented president are responding to this by escalating. And what that means is that now, there may be in the next few days, even before I get this article out, there may be another one of um, these missiles launched and take out the center of another industrial center of another Ukrainian city. In fact, the hint is, the possibility is, there could be a major, it might go hit the government buildings in Kiev. There is some word out there that the Russians are going to probably start. They already did a few incursions already. They're going to come through Chernigov. As I've often been saying, they're going to come out of the northern province, closest one to Moscow. which means it's way too close from, if it remains in Ukraine, it means Ukrainians with NATO missiles there will be able to take out Moscow in 5 minutes. And last time that happened, it happened to Kennedy when we were in Cuba, Soviet missiles that had a 5 minutes to Washington to take it out, and another 20 million Americans. And all Putin and the Russians are doing is what we did. Exactly the same thing. That was an existential threat, those missiles in Cuba. And they were going to be taken out. They either were going to, fortunately, Kennedy was going to try to negotiate them out, and he succeeded. But on my birthday, the 29th of October, in my final 13 days as a 6-year-old, I turned 7, changed my life, this crisis. I'm doing what I'm doing now in the Ukrainian missile crisis, all these years later, being a bit prophetic. So the thing is that what could happen next, because Putin in his speech, and I have the whole speech properly translated from the Kremlin. It's available off TASS and any other RT and stuff. That's why they want to ban RT. It's actually very good. You should try to look at it if you haven't checked it out. Try to see why they want to ban it. It's real news. It's the way it's like Walter Cronkite. It's the way news used to be in this country. A lot more professional, sources, balanced. The license to have a license like CBS, NBC, and all these people have a license. One of the prerequisites of the license that you get, because you, the people, own the airwaves, not these networks. They come to your government. That is your government, not a professional bureaucratic cabal that it's turned into. It's not of, by, and for the deep state. It's of, by, for the people of the United States. So our government then is supposed to give out these licenses, but if Trump wanted to, he's been getting some advice for it. He said he could rescind the license of CBS, NBC, ABC on the grounds that they're not showing both sides. And it's so flagrant now that it's so one-sided. I mean, so, you could see, and he would be legally correct to the people, or what would happen is CBS, NBC, and ABC would have to bring in both sides and be balanced, more balanced. There was always a leaning towards the Democrats, even back in the 60s when I was becoming a news junkie at 7. But it has gone so one-sided now that it's just, there really are grounds to say we're revoking your license. And same could happen with Facebook and others. One of the things that might happen, this would be great for freedom of speech, because I've been terribly shadow banned on Facebook. Tens of thousands of people that can't reach me anymore, and they just pointed them away from me. And that is against my free speech and the freedom of my readers on Facebook to decide whether they want to friend me or not have Big Brother say it. So Zuckerberg might end up having to, he'll be turned into a publisher rather than what he's a platform. So that means, well, that would mean he'd have to allow people, to be, it'll change the way it is for them. But anyway, the other thing that's happening, just a sideline before, MSNBC, which I also appeared on, as well as CNN and Fox over the years. MSNBC is Comcast, who owns NBC, is dumping it, and the Sci-Fi Channel and a few other things. And so now they cannot pay the multi-million-dollar salaries because what's happening is it's killing NBCs because there's so many people leaving, especially after the election. Even more people are leaving the mainstream news. It's getting so bad that people like Paul, people like me, we may be the mainstream news before this year is out, this new year coming, because it's imploding. Now people are leaving them in droves. And there are a number of outlets like Rumble, like Clayton and Natalie Morris on Redacted. They also are on YouTube. They're also constantly being hounded. That might change too with the new administration. They won't be doing that. So this whole X revolution is now, because Trump won. Now a lot of the things are going to probably open up for freedom of speech, um, and not be shadow banned. Um, and that's important because the when the speech isn't right, what you need is more speech, not less. If somebody's saying a whole load of hooey, you have a right to say, hey, that's a whole load of hooey, and here's why. And then he has a right to counter you, and debate and discussion goes on. That's the foundation of this country, and if we lose it, there is no America. Whether you're blue, red, or indifferent of either color, or independent, doesn't matter. You will lose your independence. And maybe in the beginning, some of the people that you've never liked that are using the internet, you'll fight, oh yeah, that's great, he's gone, I don't want to hear it. But you're next. You are next. That's how it works. So there's no way to step into the issue of censorship as a moderator. The only way, I've thought about it for years, how does one work? Because I don't have a family, but my life has a different trajectory this time around. This life, I was not here to come make babies, but to give myself a rebirth. So how does one work it out? And I've tried. I was thinking, well, how? Because I also get confronted with a lot of really ugly stuff, and reactions and stuff. And first thing, remember, don't give it power. A lot more positive people are coming in saying their things than the negatives. And the problem is that it's something I watched my mind always doing, is magnifying the minority of people who are abusing me online. And all I could do was watch myself get angry and watch the storm go by. And then now it's different. Now I get that. But it was a struggle. I'm an anger type. That's my ego type. Some people are greedy, frightened, different. It's Gurdjieff used to talk about it, and sometimes the Enneagram has been kind of created after George Gurdjieff's talking about, the ego types that you have, or the shape of your idiot, he would call it. And he even had toast to the idiots. Well, he's a round idiot. He's another this kind of idiot, and he always meant it respectfully, because idios means under the illusion of being separate from the whole, which is this separateness that is fundamentally responsible for us nearly on the threshold of World War III becoming a nuclear World War III. So that this is what's important, and it's going to get more crazy because Russia has said, we reserve the right, because you're attacking us. This is an attack on us by you in the United States and Europe, and we're not going to stand for it anymore. If you fire missiles at us again, we will respond in kind on you. And it doesn't always have to be attacks in Ukraine. We can launch these missiles on Britain, on France, on bases all around the world that the United States has. The other thing they can do is give their technology to the nations of the global majority so that they can defend themselves from you. So that's where this could go. And it all stops if at some point these idiots in London, number 10 Downing, these idiots in the White House, these idiots in Berlin, these idiots in Brussels, it comes a point where even an idiot wants to save his ass. And it may get that bad. It might, because these people are so dense that Russia might have to, it doesn't have to use nukes to do a lot of damage. Russians have cultivated, as this shows, very powerful non-nuclear weapons. For instance, they have hypersonic technology that we're 10 years behind with. And reason is that the Soviet Union used to study hypersonic, like the wing, the hypersonic wing. And so the Russians have been looking at these things since 1960s. So it looked like it took them very fast to do it in the last 20 years, but it's because they've been trying these theories out, and now they finally got them working. And um, it means that there's shots of this missile. This missile was literally glowing, spraying its fuel in a huge fan as it was flying over Astrakhan and into the dawn light, um, because it took decades for the Russians to learn what kind of elements and metals and things they could use that would keep the rocket in good condition, white hot, because it's flying through the atmosphere, the high atmosphere, but it's flying at a flat trajectory at Mach 10. Some say Mach 12, like I was saying about the overcast. People were calculating the speed of the ones coming down through the overcast at Mach 12. So it might even be higher than what Putin said, Mach 10. But the Sarmad, the Good Samaritan, the Sarmat, which is can have 10 major MIRV nuclear warheads, is this huge thing. I mean, it's almost as tall as the statue part of the Statue of Liberty. That's how big it is. And they have 80 of them now. They're all set up, and they fly at Mach 27, 27 times the speed of sound. They can literally, then they won't be launched over the pole. They will be launched to fly over the South Pole and come up upon America from the south, where none of its radars are pointed. And if they were pointed, it can fly around the radar fields. So you can't even see it when it comes. That's the kind of stuff the Russians have built. While we were dismantling all those treaties that would have prevented such weapons from being built. And the Russians did not want to make these kinds of weapons. We pushed them into it because when Bush took out the ABM treaty in 2002, anti-ballistic missiles, ABMs, and then when Trump, one of the biggest mistakes, which may be his end and the human race's end, is when he listened to all those Pompeo fools and um, he dismantled the INF treaty, the Intermediate Missile Range treaty. We almost blew up the world in the late 80s because a new system, the Pershing 2, Pershing 3 missiles, the SS-20s on the Russian side, were medium range missiles just for hitting European Russia and the Russians hitting European proper. 1/3 of Europe is Russia's. So there were 1,200, 1,600 of these that were now all within 4 or 5 minutes. Not enough time to tell whether it's an accidental firing, whether and nobody and they all have nukes on them. So if anything happened within a minute or two, somebody would have to respond with all the other intermediate range going. It was a hair trigger. It was insane. And What ended was there was Able Archer, which was a rehearsal that was done in 1983. I was in the Oregon commune with Osho at that time, and I remember that Osho suddenly in the early part of that year said, "There's a great chance that there'd be a thermonuclear war this year." And so the news got around that he was inquiring if the land that we could build a cave city and protect his people. And then, there was the Korean airliner that got shot down later in the year. And a lot of it stemmed from the Russian Andropov being the premier of the Soviet Union. There was a crisis politically because just like Joe Biden, they're all old, aged, one after the other. There were like three Politburo heads that were senile. Brezhnev went senile like Biden. It's a funny thing that when the Soviet Union ended not long after that, and it's not surprising that a sign that our country as a hegemon is going to end soon. It is ending because we're already showing the signs we're electing mentally ill people uh, clearly are not able to think straight as our presidents, and that means who's pulling their strings are not the people that we voted for. So anyway, he it's so this rot has happens at the end, and I'm just hoping that we're all still here by the 20th of January, or most of us aren't here anymore, and those who are remaining will wish they were with us, because living after a thermonuclear attack is not good. Now, there's going to be something happening in Washington. Hopefully, it'll be 1 million people, but there's going to be a gathering at the Lincoln Memorial on the 7th of December, Pearl Harbor Day. On the 7th of December, there's gather there, and there's going to be hopefully 1 million people, and then they are going to walk and ring around the Capitol peacefully. Just 1 million people around the Capitol, and then they're going to march off to the White House and be 1 million people around that. Hopefully, at least hundreds of thousands, but enough to say something. It's time to bring back to life the anti-nuclear movement, which so successfully helped us end the last Cold War without it going nuclear. And it was the pressure that happened by protests of this kind that caused Reagan to, when he heard that Able Archer, that the Russians were actually, somebody called him up and said, "You got to get those Able Archer people to stop what they're doing. Andropov and the Soviets think that you're really going to strike them." Because and so the Soviets thought they were going to get hit, and they were just about ready to preempt the launch with all their nukes. And again, and they had time. We're talking about when we don't have that time now, especially if NATO puts missiles in Ukraine. Then we're in the same place. And what happened is when the intermediate range missiles treaty was taken out by the Americans, by Trump, by terrible advice, military industrial complex wanted to start making more weapons, an arms race. So what then happened is that um, the Russians still honored the treaty. They said, we're not going to build any missiles, intermediate range missiles. We'll watch you. And if you start moving missiles again into Europe, intermediate range missiles, then we will begin making them. Well, that started many years. The Russians did not do anything about it since the last part of the last decade in 2018 when Trump did this terrible move. One of the worst moves any president's ever made, by ripping up that treaty, because it made the new START treaty irrelevant. In February, it runs out. It might have already run out in 2023. So that means all the treaties that have kept us from proliferating more weapons of mass destruction and nuclear weapons We did it. Our leaders, step by step, took all those safety treaties away and have put the human race, all of you, in danger of thermonuclear war. This has been done by George W. Bush Jr. It's been done by Barack Obama, who also increased the first strike in our doctrine of nuclear strikes. Trump made it even harder in his first term. I certainly hope he's learned his lesson. There's signs that he has, and hopefully he will do what he wants to do, is end the war in Ukraine. But please don't waste my time with, I'll get it done in one day. Mr. Trump, you're going to have a rude awakening, and hopefully you will grow from it as a president, because I'm happy that you got Tulsi Gabbard, who's going to be the person who briefs you about world events every day, because except for having the same blindness for Zionism that Trump has and a lot of the people that are in his cabinet, as far as Ukraine and the rest of the world goes, he's going to get the real intelligence reports, and he channels whatever's in front of him. So he'll be channeling what's really going on in the world. And so what I hope is he's going to have a very rapid education. He's going to find out that he's going to, if he has certain ideas about Trump stopping, or there being an end or kind of a buffer zone and all that, no. That would be like people going to Hitler and saying, I mean, it's a wrong analogy because people say, oh, you're saying Putin is Hitler. Well, he isn't. But what it means is the Russians are winning this war. And the terms are going to be theirs, just like it was when we were the Allies and we beat Hitler. NATO's losing this war. We're the losers in this war. And all he wants to do, it's very simple. Ukraine never joins NATO. It remains a neutral nation. The Russians don't want to govern Ukraine. They will govern the parts of Ukraine that are Russian, because they've been so abused since Ukraine became an independent state and went fascist, and really fascist in 2014. They literally ethnic cleansing the Russians. Never gets in the news. They wanted all the industrial might of Eastern Ukraine, because that's where all the industry is, but it's run by Russian people, Russian Ukrainians. And so their whole idea, with NATO's help, was to cleanse them out of the Donbass and Crimea, which have always been for 300 years Russian provinces. It's just a fluke of history that when Ukraine was made independent in 1991, at the end of the Cold War, first Cold War, that Crimea didn't go back to Russia. When Khrushchev put it into Ukraine in 1954, Lenin put the Donbass regions, pure Russian provinces, into Ukraine in 1925. Stalin took the Galicia, which was part of Poland, where the real nest bed of all the fascists are in Ukraine, the Western Ukrainians. Now that became a part of Russia, which it's not a part of Russia historically. So this body politic parted Frankenstein monster is Ukraine. It never was itself an independent country or a group of people of like-mindedness to become an independent country. A whole lot of people were stuck there by other people, not by their own choice. So it's a toxic mess. I mean, if you understand what Ukraine means, it means, you say, oh, what country do you come from? I come from borderland. Oh, a borderland? Borderland of what? Well, it used to be, I come from the borderland of all the Russias as a province, but because now we're trying to pretend Ukrainians are trying to pretend that they have no connection to the Russians, that the Russians are more Mongols, lower Slavs. Fascism's always got the same story. And uh, I didn't even look at that. I said, well, follow the movements of the Mongol hordes and wherever they were seeding their seed. And frankly, there was probably more Mongolian seed going into Kiev, which they sacked, than there was in Novgorod. But Muscovy, Novgorod, Minsk, and all those areas, the Mongols went in. And so everybody has some Asiatic heritage. Uh, I have it since I have so much Russian and Ukrainian in me, and Jews, Ukrainian Jews. And yeah, so so um it's going to get very interesting. It's going to probably get very terrifying, but just remember, make a stink about it. Write Trump and get Trump to be more openly, publicly talking about what's going on. He needs, he made this speech talking about this peace plan. And the following day is when maybe Biden was coerced, maybe Biden was just handed something to sign by Blinken and Sullivan, Gilbert Sullivan, I think. The Gilbert and Sullivan. It's a comedy. Uh, the the day after he started, he escalated the war and made it global, firing the missiles, going right up against what the Russians said. We're not bluffing, don't do that. And then they fired back. So we're now in that 17, the Ukrainian missile crisis. It's probably going to last a lot longer than 13 days, might be a few months, but we're in it. And why is Trump so silent? He needs to get out and say, I will not have my presidency. I know what these people are doing. They're trying to hamstring my presidency before it can start. Their whole plan is to get America so deeply into some war with Russia. They're going to hand me a third world war that I have to fight rather than give me the chance to make peace. Because, of course, if I make peace, I'm going to look like a Russian foe, a Russian file. They're going to say, you see, Russiagate, Russiagate. It's a setup to take his presidency down before he can even start it. I've never seen, and the worst president since Biden was Millard Fillmore. Although he wasn't a mean guy, he wasn't this revengeful old man, but he was such an incompetent that, of course, the Civil War followed. And I've been saying Biden is the worst president in American history. I saw it coming. I saw, if you've read me and seen me on other shows, I said that if he, not only did I talk about him not finishing his term if he were president, but I also saw that he had all the signs to start World War III. And he started it. So I hate being right about that, but there it is. So we have to face this reality. And um, we're in uncharted historical waters. What happened in the Cuban Missile Crisis, I lived through it. What I hope will happen, one thing, is nothing like what we're doing. We started orders of magnitude beyond the Cuban Missile Crisis. It wasn't even a shot fired. We're already shooting this war. What I hope happens is a very healthy shock that happened to the American world I was just growing up in at my 6th year. That brought our attention to how nuclear war is dangerous, how it's, we just missed killing ourselves. And that stayed with us for several generations. And it was why it was still with us in the 80s when these new missiles were kind of looming to create no time to know who's firing at what. So you just launch everything and hope you got it right, which means both sides are dead. Uh, and not in an easy, sleep, peaceful way either. So that has to that has to happen, but if there's something good comes, it's the other thing that meditation teaches you. Every challenge in life, everything that happens in your life is an opportunity to grow deeper into the eternal witness. So the opportunity is, so suddenly fear is not always negative, and being good is not always positive. You start to see that, for instance, Kamala Harris has way too many trines in her chart. I write about this in my astrological assessment of her and Trump. She has the problem of having things come too easy. She gets promoted too easy. Powerful men in her life as a mistress and others, Willie Brown and Barack Obama, have always been in her life getting her to go rise higher and higher to places she's not earned. Because she has so many squares, she's lucky. It's easy, but there's nothing there because she doesn't have that many squares, so she's never challenged. Squares you got to have so you can grow. And she also has a ton of sextiles, which are also positive. So it's like it's all going good, but it can go good all the way to the Peter principle, where it's a theory that if you're really good at rising to the top, you finally reach a point that's your goal where you're completely unprepared to be president of the United States, for instance, or president of the company. I mean, Barack Obama has that problem too. Uh, he's uh, he's very good at rising to the top, but he was a big charming nothing really, and he has anyway. So I'm hoping that now people will remember how dangerous nuclear wars are by nearly starting one, like we did back in the early 60s. And if that happens, that could lead to a healthy fear of nuclear weapons, just like I have a healthy fear of not putting my hand into a wall of flame. What could go wrong with that? Fear can be a good thing. It brings attention. And that's what we're needing to do now. And it's also a good sign that a lot of the mainstream media, which has clearly shown it's not telling the truth to people, is now kind of getting removed. So that could be a better thing for these public commons like X. For instance, if you're listening to, is it Outlook, you said? Is that what it's called?
Spaces,
It's called what?
spaces,
Bases.
space,
Spaces.
spaces.
Yeah, Spaces is a part of X. So we're doing our first kind of imprint into X, which is great because that's where it's because of X that the election went the way it did. So, because people can speak there freely. So, I'm thinking we'll have more interesting things to say and a wider audience there.
Right. Well, let me just remind the ones on spaces. So this is our first broadcast through Spaces Live, as we're recording our show for YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. So our next recording in about 2 weeks, we're going to be taking listeners' questions live. So please join us in 2 weeks or so to ask questions with John, and he'll answer. So hopefully it'll be more interactive. The whole idea is that to build a show that's a little bit more interactive, and then subsequent recordings we're going to be doing live streaming on multiple channels. So this will be a little bit more involved recording compared to previous ones, but we're testing it out to just to get the audience warmed up with a little bit more interactiveness with with
I
John.
love questions and answers. Any of you have been watching me for 30 years on Coast to Coast. You can see that, you know, I mean, when Art Bell used to do it for 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours, a lot we had just hours of questions and answers, and
Well, you know what I noticed, John, is like
I love it.
I was doing a show this morning, and I was doing a double channel stream, and I started taking calls from spaces, right, from X. The show that normally lasts about 2 hours, 2 3 hours, that was recording. It ended up being a 5 hour show. It can go, I mean, it can
Yeah,
go off the rails,
yeah,
because these conversations can go, in any direction. It's totally unstructured,
yeah.
and
Well, that's why.
it's hard to
Yeah,
keep it. It's hard to keep keep it.
keep it going. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, definitely. I know the Duran. They try. They can go to
Yeah,
two
no,
hours, and then
yeah,
they kind of. But yeah, we kind of have to grow a discipline where we say, okay, I think this is about it now,
right,
because the time will fly. I mean, that's why Joe Rogan, the Walter Cronkite of our times. Odd that a blogger would be this, but he really has become the Walter Cronkite of our time. His show is 3 hours minimum.
right, right, right.
Our shows sometimes get
Our
a few
shows
3 hour ones
we're
ourselves.
yeah, our shows run anywhere from 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah,
A lot of them run about 2.5 hours.
yeah.
But just to remind, the ones that are on Spaces, we will be taking questions next show in 2 weeks. But we're just trying to warm everyone up to the idea, and then we're going to be doing live streaming also, not just recordings. But John, my take on what's going on with the deep state and the new, missile launches in Ukraine and all that. What I'm concerned with is that they're going to put Trump in a situation. They know that Trump wants to restructure the national security state, and it's obvious with his nominations for the cabinet. And the national security state wants to maintain power.
Mm,
They don't want to be restructured. They want a growing budget, not a shrinking budget.
that's right.
They want growing power, not shrinking power. My concern is that some sort of event will be orchestrated that's very similar to 9/11, where it forces the hand of Trump to make sure that the national security state gets additional power, very similar to what happened with the Patriot Act post
Well,
9/11.
we're going to see what Trump is doing, what this cabinet is doing. This, I've been monitoring this since uh, Irene L. Hughes, the clairvoyant of Chicago in the 60s, became aware of her work in the mid 60s. She's very accurate. She's since passed. But one of the things she said, I've collected American seers, and sometimes I write articles about people like David Goodman Crowley, who in 1888 wrote a lot of very accurate prophecies about the future of the United States. That it would return to having more sovereignty of the states and less of a federal government around our times. The other thing that Irene L. Hughes said was that there would be a second American Revolution by the mid 2020s. Now, I think we're passing through that door threshold again, now that we're on this side of the election. I've been for many years saying I'm always hoping for a peaceful American Revolution and Reformation. Um, I've also been worried that saying since 1998 that the way things were going and the polarizing of the country, I said we'd probably by 2020 would probably be at the threshold of a civil war. And we're kind of in a cold civil war since 2020. But what's happening, which also feels, I have a lot of problems with a lot of the things that Trump picked. But I, it's rather than, I mean, my head would like to really get freaked out, but there's certain something in me which has always shown its trueness, is not concerned at all. There was definitely a feeling of concern up until the election that I've been kind of preparing to die, preparing to die in a nuclear war. That's not there now. So I am cautiously hopeful that, yeah, this is a revolution. We are in, now I'm starting to see that this is the shape and the nature of this peaceful revolution. Now we're through the door. We're not on the other side of November 5th. We're through the door. And now I'm starting to see, oh, we're in this new present, which was foreseen. So this the other half of the 2020s is going to be very interesting. Um, at some point we can talk about that in another show, because that could be at least 2 hours just talking about the kind of things. Well, let's let these people get chosen first before we do that show. When these picks are picked. It's interesting that Gates was kind of, I think, a maneuver because he was so anathema for the rhinos in the Senate that he stepped down. But that allowed Trump to actually pick somebody who's even more qualified than he is to run
Well,
the Justice Department.
someone posted on X, I think it was yesterday, where Bondi, gets approved by the Senate,
Yeah.
and that she appoints Gates as special counsel. And I can see that actually happening.
That's one of the scenarios.
You know,
That's one of the scenarios. And yeah, she'll need a deputy, and the deputy will be doing all the charging in here and there.
I don't think we've seen the end of Gates at
He's just
all.
going to be a lawyer again in service of the Justice Department. I think no, he's not gone. And I mean, even MSNBC's moderators are so blind to stuff was seeing that. They were saying, oh, and of course they were taking it in the negative. Oh no, I think this is even worse because she's the state attorney general of Florida, so she's literally got the chops. She knows how to do it. But uh, Gates, Bondi's got that. Gates does not have that kind of experience. Similarly, the man who Headset, I'm probably mispronouncing his name.
Big Seth.
Yeah,
Higgs.
Hank Sick. He, I think it's good that there's a person who it's a healthy thing to have an actual veteran, somebody who had to fight the wars the Pentagon sent boys and girls into. I think that is good. It's good that Tulsi Gabbard also still a serving major, I think. I don't know if she's a lieutenant colonel now, but she was in the medical department, first aid for the soldiers busted up in the Iraq War. She was in country, in the conflict. The so and
Lieutenant,
it's just as
you're right, Lieutenant Colonel.
yeah, she did. She got promoted to lieutenant colonel. Yeah, she's still active. Um, this now this man doesn't know how to manage anything. He's never been in a management field, but he doesn't have to be. He can pick a deputy who is. I mean, that's the next thing to do is to find somebody who really knows the biggest business in the world, the Pentagon, the biggest organization in the world when it with if you count all the security sides of it, it's $1 trillion a year, losing trillions of dollars lost and without auditing, finding it. It's a big, massive affair that'd be daunting for anyone. So the smart thing to do for this guy is he be the theme man, and then he has somebody who can manage the Pentagon who is his deputy. So that can happen. And of course, one of the great picks is HHS, Robert Kennedy Jr. That is the core that's big pharma. Look out. You've got a target on you and you've earned it.
I think it's a combination of big pharma and also big ag. Big
Yes, it's
ag
big
is
ag.
group, really is
Yeah.
poison the food supply.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that he's absolutely, and it's wonderful that Maha is now with MAGA, make America healthy again, because it's true. And the amount of money and health and issues that's happening in this country, we're our crappy diet is killing us, and it's also draining our wealth as much as these forever wars are. But it's again in this next couple weeks, all you people who are supporting this revolution, don't just sit at home and watch it go by. You got to get out and protest and demonstrate peacefully. You don't want forever wars. You don't want this forever war in Ukraine.
Mhm.
You don't want this World War III to always every morning you wonder if you're going to wake up. You don't want to go through that, where I woke up most of the first Cold War. I woke up and I said, "Oh, we're still here." Okay. It was always a sword of Damocles hovering over every human being because of the mutually assured destruction that could happen if a mistake was made or an outright war started with these nukes. I grew up with that. Most of the later generations, younger generations, have forgotten. You want to don't think you're going to put your hand in that fire and not have it burned off. So, with the rest of your blood and bones and everything, this is the thing that is good about these times. And the other thing is, yes, the deep state is going to. Well, I still say that our next president is going to constantly have to be vigilant because it's not, they could also do something to him like they tried a couple times earlier in the campaign. That's one way to end the problem. So yeah,
I,
these
did you
guys.
did you read the book from Annie Jacobson about the nuclear war? You have it? You're reading it now? It's yeah. I listened to the audio version
Mm,
probably about 2 weeks ago. I'll tell you, it's done really well, and it walks you through minute
mm,
by minute, in some cases second by second,
yeah,
what would be going on with a nuclear strike.
yeah,
And I'll tell you what the big takeaway from the book that I had was that our government isn't going to help us. FEMA is not going to be there, and really the continuity of government is all about uh, really protecting the elite class.
yeah. And as her book, I mean, Scott Ritter has read this thing 3 times. And he used to be involved. He was one of the Marine majors that was taking a team to Central Soviet Union to monitor the dismantling of SS-20s during the INF Treaty. And he later then was for 7 years a UN weapons inspector chief of picking up whatever Saddam Hussein was hiding after the Persian Gulf War, which he was on the general staff of Schwarzkopf. He was the guy hunting for the Scuds when he was still a Marine major. And one of my oldest sources, we've never met, but I try to put a heads up for everybody to read his articles and to read his books. I have his book on his experiences with the missiles. And so, he's got a big heart, but he's a Marine. He admits it. He's like, go, no, no. He's like a Marine. I get you, sir. You know,
He was a
but
football
it's
player too. He used to be a
hmm?
football player. He used to be a football player in high school, I thought.
Well, he sure's got the body for it. I
No,
mean,
I think he was a
he's
football player too.
tall as a tree and as massive as an oak. Yeah, he's a big bunny. And yeah, he's really healthy. And yeah, well, he was doing that. He was an Army rat. I mean, Air Force. His mom and dad served in the Air Force. And so he was in Germany um, during the Cold War, at the Fulda Gap, and talks about it. So he was constantly having to deal with, because there'd be times where suddenly there would be some emergency, and his father had to immediately leave the house and go to a special fortified bunker, which meant, kiss the children and Scott and his sister and mother, and then go under. And then the feeling was we're out up here on above ground and we might just be ash and he might survive it or not. That happened many times when there was a
But
little
this is
something that made people go, oops, something new.
right. I mean, what is insane is how the American public, with their tax-paying dollars, allow this insanity to continue. I mean, this. I mean, I have been, I've never been like an anti-war individual, but I
Mm.
absolutely hate the concept of nuclear power and nuclear war. And
Nobody
like
wins.
this, from the moment I was born to now, I we could be incinerated at any given moment,
Mhm.
and it's just
In
this crazy.
72 minutes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's what she brings up in the book is that this thing's been over our heads and no one's really paying attention and how close.
Well, and then what Scott Ritter adds that she's done so well in this book, because he knows firsthand, there are systems in the doctrine, nuclear doctrine, that are like set. The decisions have already been made. It's just something that happens in the world, then pulls that knob, and it just goes on automatic. And she gets a lot into that, how it's just set up, and it's like the guns of August and all the arm treaties in Europe in 1914, that they thought because they were so tripwired and ready that no one would ever fight. All these huge armies. And of course, somebody shoots Archduke Francis, and then literally a month later, from in Bosnia it happened, and a month later the Austrians are going to war with the Serbians as if it's collective punishment for this one nationalist that lived not even in Serbia. And then it just all the tripwires went off. The way they tried to prevent war actually made it come faster, and nobody wanted it. Not the Kaiser, not the Tsar, not George V of England, no, or Clemenceau, or all those people in France. No, nobody wanted the war, and suddenly they, duty bound to the treaties, they had the war, and it destroyed. It was the beginning of the end of European dominance of the world, and which is really coming to its complete conclusion now. And it's interesting. There's a petition right now, and I watch Mowat's The Mother of All Shows, with George Galloway, another long-term source of mine from Britain. And there's a petition going out, and they already got 1 million people on it in like the first day. Where they want the people of Britain want another election to kick out Labour and Starmer, because they replaced the Conservatives with Starmer, and he's a twit. He again, and so they were talking on the show a lot about how it's like the British Empire kind of went to seed in the head when it finally went down. Now, the American Empire is kind of seed in the head, getting seedy. We are seeing the end of the era, the 34-year era or so of American hegemony. And it's a good thing, because it's such a burden to have yourself trying to control a world that does not want you to control it, that would prefer what the BRICS are doing. Create a multipolar world where each country's sovereignty is respected, and no more wars, so that the wealth that's being squandered in war can be given to make people healthier, eat healthier, can be given to help people get educations, fresh water, can increase agricultural yields, can help people to fight wars on climate change rather than wars against each other, or at least adapt to the changes that are happening over the next 1,000 years, which is unavoidable. Um, we can stop what we're doing, putting in it now, but we've already pumped enough into the system to raise the oceans 130 feet in the next few centuries. So we're going to live in a world where we have to have floatable harbors or something, because those harbors will be 130 feet underwater. And so we will have to adapt to that. But you can adapt to that if you have military industrial complex which in a dominant hegemonic power, a weaponized dollar that is sanctioning the whole world, using it as a weapon to do our bidding, not theirs, not respecting their own um, individual industry and interests. Um, the only way your business can thrive in a warmongering industry is you've got to keep causing chaos and war in the world. The worst thing that human beings ever do. It is such bad karma for those fools that think, those billionaires that ring their mansions around the District of Columbia, where Washington is. Yeah, they're big and they're powerful, and this is revolution, folks. Hopefully it'll stay peaceful. But yeah, we have caused this problem by not being vigilant. We got a little fat and sassy and kind of took for granted that because we never lost our freedoms. The founding fathers lost theirs. The people that left Europe and left the 30 Years' War and left all that stuff where the king decides what faith you have, not your own heart. That's why they created that Constitution. They had lost their freedom. And maybe we lost ours, and that's, again, as a meditator will say, another opportunity to take this as a challenge to grow. Return to your vigilance and never lose it again, because that's the simple thing over a period of many generations that has happened to us. The American people gave up on themselves. They got just interested in their things and their families. They forgot their community, the community of Americans that we are. So we're going to suffer necessarily the loss of these things, and then we will regain them. So yeah, it's the deep. If there's any violence, it's going to be the deep state. But we have to. But if the whole body of Americans understand this danger, it's going to take a while. This is what's going to happen. If Trump survives his first term, he will perhaps make the foundation for it, and then either J.D. Vance. But I still hold out that another Trump will be president. Don Jr. He's young as J.D. Vance, basically. It's possible. I also see that J.D. Vance may grow into being a very good president. He's got a lot of growing to do, but he has potential there. And again, this is the oracular part of me. I go, oh, really? Really? That guy? I go, okay, I
I'm
don't see it,
really a
but
big
I
fan.
don't personally see it, but you see it. Okay, I'll have to say that, even though it's not really my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, JD Vance to me, I just like, I wasn't that really happy with the pick. Maybe he can. I'll warm up more to JD Vance.
Read his book. Read his book about his life. It's a very good book. He he how he grew up, and he had a tough growing up, and it made him it's important to see how his mother, he was had no father, and his mother was a drug addict, and out in the Appalachia, poor folk out in Appalachia in Ohio mountains hills, and he managed to keep the family together, help his mom go to college, work his way to college. Nobody gave him money, So he's kind of had the backwoodsman Lincoln thing going, and
I
so
mean, that's how they're trying to spin it. I don't know. I mean, there's potential there. I see
there's
potential there.
potential. A lot of
I'm just
I
not
was
sure
amazed.
it needs to mature a little bit.
Yeah,
It's a little green,
well,
with it.
we all have our immature moments, and we take our time to get more experience with life. Um, but I can see a situation where Trump is 4 years, Vance is 4 to 8 years, and then at some sequence of that, Don Jr. Trump is 4 to 8 years. This could go in, this whole movement's going to take a generation. It's going to take into the 2040s before we really clear this pestilence of deep state and here's another thing that's important that's not getting reported. The Supreme Court has one major beef about the situation. They keep saying, why are all these people who are not elected, who are career bureaucrats, why are they writing our rules? The Constitution states that it's the voters voting the people that they vote for. The elected officials are the only people who can make the laws and the rules and write the bills. We have all these. It's like what happened one time when there was something Scott Ritter was talking about. There was a thing that was supposed to happen, and it was a real good move forward. And then it was suddenly it was put on a kibosh. It was not. It was stopped, and they said, "Well, why was it stopped?" Well, the interagency doesn't approve of it.
Right.
Well, who's this interagency? The deep state. Did anybody vote them to be doing what they're doing? No. Is what they're doing constitutional? No. So these bureaucrats that are then and donors, I mean, the thing that sooner or later has to happen is the Citizens United has to be overturned. Corporations aren't people. They're not human beings. They're not citizens. That's how you buy the place. The corporation is an American person with trillions of dollars in his pockets. He can buy his way anywhere. The other thing is that APAC has to file as a foreign agent, like everybody else that works with foreign countries. And this inordinate influence through money, corruption, that is literally one of the reasons why a Zionist point of view, which is anathema to most Jews, is our government is in Netanyahu's pocket. And there's going to be some problems with that with Trump because of his daughter marrying into the very heart of the Zionist issues. Um, he's her husband, Kirshner, Jared Kirshner, is very close to Netanyahu and all the very core of the Zionist hardcore. And so, there's where a channeler who loves his daughter, they're very close, he's got, it'll be interesting to see if he can step back and say, well, son-in-law, we're not going to do that. I'm the president. So I'm hopeful. It seems he has learned. He's already correctly pointing out his errors. But with him, it's because he's a Gemini with Uranus and the true north. The good news is he's very lucky. I mean, if anybody could survive assassination attempts further down the road, he is the one. If there's anybody that has the luck and the audacity to defeat the deep state or begin the long road, he's got that potential. Uh, I think some of his picks I don't think Rubio will last very long. And I don't think the fellow who's running NSA he's way out of his depth. It is good that he's a combat veteran, but he's a little bit into the he's a Christian Zionist nationalist. You know, he believes in the the uh, the Book of Revelation is just like unfortunately our Speaker of the House is the same way. He's the third person in line to be president. He's also a Jesus freak. So um, I call it a misinterpretation of the Book of Revelation. Um, but I tend to lean more towards the preterist point of view. Started in the 16th century, actually, is where the the preterists believe that the Old Testament prophecies and the prophecies of the Book of Revelation, the small apocalypse of the Mount of Olives, Sermon of Jesus, all were fulfilled in the first century, the last ones, rather than a judgment day apocalypse coming 2,000 years in the future. They argue that the books were more symbolic than literal, and that the Christian era, what St. John of Patmos was talking about, he may be the same St. John, although there are lots of Johns in those days, so it may be somebody else, but he had if you read the book of Revelation without Sunday school imprints, just as it is, like an open person, you will notice that he is constantly saying, it's just around the corner. It's just going to happen. It's going to happen in our lifetime. It's now. There's at least 21 references into, that's why he's talking to the churches in the first half of the book of Revelation. He's trying to, in his cave where he's imprisoned by the Romans in the island of Patmos, he's sending out letters to the churches and he's saying, get ready because it's coming now, not 2,000 years later. In fact, if you look at the quotes, I think it's in Matthew and Mark or Luke. I can't. It's might be in all three. But the you look at how if you watch carefully even the translations and text of the New Testament, there are variation on this, a lot of the same stories. There's very there it's like you can tell they're witnessing the stories, and of course Luke wasn't even there, so he's more like a chronicler. um but the one thing that's almost verbatim without a word change, which means it's been put in later, is he said, I'm coming soon, all this, but no one knows the time. No one can know when the time happens. That is inserted in the New Testaments of these prophets, and it's so exactly the same, more than anything else in those books. My sense it was put in later, centuries later, by the organized religion, maybe in the Council of Nicaea. It was put in when the Bible and which books were going to be included and which books were going to be not included were decided, and the volume of the testaments that were not put in are twice as thick as the New Testament. So they could have got some things wrong there. And then some of the things that they were against is that a lot of people thought Jesus was just an enlightened man, not a son of God. So he became son of God from the Council of Nicaea. So there are all these. It's coming now, not later, in the book of Revelation. And it's the most important tell is how John of Patmos was bending over backwards to almost tell you how to decode 666, and the earlier editions 616 as the number of the beast. In Revelation 13, the later edition that's survived, the fragments have 616, so that's closer to John's pen than the copy that we all use in 300, third century. And he says, because they didn't have numbers then, so it's like every letter had a numerical value. So the name of the beast is somebody that if you take his name and spell it out, all the letters will add up to 666. But in the early one, he says 616. Well, it spells out, and it's a contemporary. He's not in the future. He's coming with this revelation. It's in Greek, it's Neron Kaiser in the older edition, 666. That means Nero Caesar. So the beast is Rome. It's not some future group. It's not Russia, Gog and Magog and all that. It's nations in that time in the first century. And the earlier 616 is Caligula Kaiser in Greek. That means Caligula Caesar. So that's objective proof that this thing is about a near future event. And the preterists say that it was preparing for the kingdom to come to earth, but that was the era of Christ. And Christ lived and died, but really it didn't start going until the disciples started converting people 30 years later when Rome was being sacked. So the temple being destroyed, and then he said, I can raise this temple in 3 days. He made that statement. They left the temple, they went up on the Mount of Olives, and that's when the disciples asked him, what did you mean by saying that? And this is the only text in the Bible which is not a third person or a second person. But it was not a third person account. Like you got Jesus, and then it got told by somebody else, and then it becomes like Luke is a third person. Matthew was there, but he was second person. I heard Jesus say this and wrote it down later in my life, decades later when I learned how to write or something like that. And then the other, but the Mount of Olives sermon is where all the disciples heard it from Jesus, quoted 1 to 2. So, and it's a crisis of faith. It's the little apocalypse they call it, because it's actually Jesus. This is where you hear what hard time it will be for women who are pregnant, and there will be wars and rumors of wars. That's how he starts it. And in a strange way, if you read it, if I have time, I might retranslate it and say, well, if you're not doctrinized, you could equally argue that Matthew 27, that part where you say, there'll come a day where you'll come to me and say, we cast out demons, we helped people, we did all these great deeds in your name. And he'll say, go away, you makers of iniquity, I never knew you, and you never knew me. Something like that in Matthew 27. I can't remember the month, if it's in the 20s or something, but anyway. And what I took that to mean is a simple fact that people overlook. If you were in a time warp and you went back to 33 AD, and if you saw Jesus and his disciples walking, and if you yelled out, hey, Jesus, he might go, we just keep walking. And guess what? No one ever called him Jesus when he was alive. That's later, centuries later. He was Joshua, Yeshua. And why then is everybody praying to Jesus? It's not his name. I mean, if he's the son of God, God called him Joshua. Why aren't you calling him Joshua? It's like the Jesus is a Greco-Roman misnomer. It was the last great Romanization that ancient Rome did, in its many Romanizations of civilizations and different pantheons of gods and stuff, was the Romanization of Christianity. Even Christianity, it's not what it's called. This was a Jewish reform movement, period. And it got turned by Paul, whose name's Saul, and he named himself Paul, by St. Paul, basically Rome, who spoke fluent Greek. He was worldly. He had interaction with the commerce language, and he ended up going to Rome, and all of that happened, Greek areas. He took a lot of things from other popular Roman mainstream religions, like the cult of, well, not a cult, it was a religion of Mithras. The Roman legions all worshiped Mithras. Mithras was born of a virgin, and he was raised from the dead. And the Holy Eucharist of his Last Supper is verbatim the Holy Eucharist in the Last Supper of the Bible. But he's Persian. He's like far more ancient Persian. The Christ figure was stolen, taken. Paul says, and why all the pagan holidays? Well, that's how he knew how to get converts. It was like, okay, well, uh, you have your Yule time thing. Well, we have ours. That's when Jesus was born. Even though, if you look at the scriptures, if the sheep are being tended up in Bethlehem, it isn't December. It's spring. because because the sheep would always go down to the lower areas. It's all snowy up there sometimes. It was more so back then. You know, you get snow up in the mountainous areas where Bethlehem and Jerusalem are. And so the sheep, because it's too cold and the sheep would die, they all would herd their sheep down towards the ocean and the flatlands where there was grass. And that would happen in spring. So and that's why Easter, I think, was also grabbed because it comes from the pagan goddess of fertility, Estrus, and or Istra, and so they turned it into Easter. It's a pagan goddess, but it became a a Christian holiday because Paul was starting to say, well, you know, this is we'll just get people already in the habit of celebrating the fertility rites, so we'll just make it the resurrection of Christ. You know, we'll just Christ has risen. That it's he even took some of it and changed it. So he was very good at propagating. In fact, I wouldn't call it Christianity. I would call it Paulianity because it was Paul that created this religion. Otherwise, it would have remained a sect of Judaism, like the Baal Shem Tov and all that, you know, because it was completely a Jewish issue. So, um, so that's where this weird relationship is with the projection of apocalypse happening in our future rather than something was symbolic, was the apocalypse of Rome sacking Jerusalem and destroying the temple and casting the diaspora. Of course, that was the beginning of it, 150 AD. There was the final kicking everybody out of the Holy Land. It's it's and you know there's this weird because you know my half my family is real born again Christian, so you know I got and me being this new pagan with wearing red and a mala and all that as a kid, a young guy, and they're always trying to save my holy butt. But the you know, I watched those Christian Jesus freak. You know, the Jesus freak movement was happening, and my brother was in it a bit. He's way matured from that. He had to go through that first. Um, but as a Christian, he's much more. He reads Greek. Yeah, I don't know what it is about we Hogues. We like weird ancient languages. He reads Greek. I read 16th century French. So. Um, So we didn't even get into the Middle East, but that could also explode and has a nuclear option to it as well. So we have two major theaters that might kind of come to a head. Um, I don't think the Iranians are going to strike though, unless they're provoked again, because the Iranians are stepping back and Netanyahu is destroying his own country. There's just it's kind of a shame. One of the real blind spots, and Trump's going to hear a lot about it in his presidency. We just had genocide Joe. Are you going to be genocide Donald? You know, it's going to be interesting how he deals with that because we're in a situation where the Palestinian genocide is not getting any attention from the world's where people can do anything about it. And so they're going full bore right now, starving them to death. Now they're going to move them again and kill a bunch of them in the up pulling. There's this new plan now to create walls all through the Gaza Strip so they're more concentrated camps. How is it that my part of my Jewish blood, you know, how is it that we survived the Holocaust and now we're doing it to seed of Abraham again, our cousin brothers and sister Arabs. We're and doing it even more viciously sometimes.
Yeah, and we're definitely going through a tumultuous period of time, and but I feel hopeful
Hmm.
in the near term, assuming that Trump can steer things to a more peaceful environment in the Middle East and in
He
Europe,
wants to. He wants to. It's truly his heart. He does. He's war adverse. He's war adverse. He doesn't.
which is very it's almost the antithesis of chaos. It's strange on how he represents chaos, but yet there is an element of his personality that doesn't want war.
No.
You would think the other way around, chaos wants war, but it's not the
Well,
case with Trump.
chaos. I've had a lot of interesting experiences with being a Nostradamus scholar. Is that everybody, even some really good scholars, even some that are in our group of four that and counting that have been nutty enough to try to translate the whole Le Prophète and interpret it. Um, Mario Reading, Edgar Leone, Henry C. Roberts, and me are the four who've done that. Mine's the largest interpretation. But Mario is since deceased back in the last decade, but Mario is a good scholar, but he got caught in the trap. Everybody looks at Nostradamus' chaos and they think it's hiding order. I mean, there's a lot of people that made a career in Nostradamus books that um, have just tried desperately to project a reality that is not there. It is chaos. Now, chaos is the mother of order. So, in a lot of Nostradamus's chaos of way he does things, there are patterns. It's true that a number of the quatrain indexes could be dates, but don't assume that now they're all dates. Mario did that and got himself in a real trap. I saw him in one of his last documentaries, and he was trying to explain it, and I was just feeling I could see in his body language and all his like, I really caught myself in a problem here because of course you can't make all the quatrains have a date. You can make it up. To some of them do, but you have to celebrate chaos in Nostradamus, and then it shows its secrets rather than your projections. And so I guess that's why I'm the last one standing of that group, because I didn't do that. Now, Leone, marvelous scholar, very much what he did helped me immensely. But he openly admitted, as a true scholar would, his weakness was that he just couldn't get his head around the occult and the magical sides of Nostradamus, and that's a big part of Nostradamus. Now, I'm I'm a pretty good scholar myself, but I'm also a subjective, empathic medium. So um, I I'm also a person who makes predictions. So I have an insight into that too, the very subjective side of it. But I'm also a historian and nonfiction writer, 52 books, and several of them bestsellers, and you know.
Well, let me just remind the audience, make sure you click the link in the description of this video and all the videos I've done with John. That will take you to his website. You can purchase his periodicals and you can also do a reading. So before we close it out, John, maybe you can just give just a little hint of what a reading is, what they get, um, you know, what they could expect. Especially, it's getting, near the end of the year. It's probably a good time to do a reading. So,
This is really a good time to a lot of people are coming in, and it's a new year. This is the high season every year. December through February is the peak season for prophecy interest. And well, basically, I have my Hogue prophecy report, which usually comes in roughly at the end of one month into the other month. Um, it's fully illustrated. I send it as a PDF file. It's a slightly lower tech way of doing it, but it's a way to keep me underneath all the censorship and stuff like that is happening. Basically, what happens is that you a donation of $60, you go to myhogeprophecy.com and you'll find there some samples of earlier things I've done that are free. I have a few more to add, but I've been so busy with the presidential election that some of the things from the last 2 months, 3 months, I haven't been able to put there yet. But it'll be coming soon. But there's still a lot of great material that is free there that you can read and see if you like it and are interested. And then there's a little thing in the back at the end of the freebies where it says how to get it, how to you can do an automatic payment is one way. Then the other is a 1 year $60 or a little more. And a minimum of 60 though. And that gives you 12 months. That's only $5 a month. And it's illustrated. The PDFs are really beautiful. I make them funny as much as I can. If you can't laugh at Doomsday, what can you laugh at? And so there's just a lot of detail, and you also get an entryway into all of my sources in the alternative media that I've been talking about. I'm always trying to share all my sources with my readers. And then I invite you through me to come discover these wonderful people that are also doing amazing work. Um, and you'll get a whole different view about what's going on in the world than what the mainstream is telling you. And I know because I spent since 1987 doing hundreds of TV shows on every media you can name. I've done it. BBC as well, Big Sky News, Hong Kong, India, Russia, Italy, Europe, and so I've seen it from as being a kind of a special guest in all these different shows. MSNBC, CNN, Fox. I used to debate Sean Hannity, fluster him, and also the CBS, NBC. Ancient Prophecies in the 90s was a huge hit. It was the last thing NBC did in that kind of genre. But I had in the 4 parts, I had 15-minute segments in that. A lot of people first discovered my work through Ancient Prophecies and when it first came out in 1994, 95, 96, 97. And then the other thing is that I do these readings. It's it's done online with Zoom, and they're usually 90 minutes. Well, they can go even longer. We go deep. It has an astrological aspect, but you don't need to do the astrology to get a full experience. But I do a little astrology as well. And what happens is you go to astro.com and you get a free chart. You just have to type in your times and it just makes it for you. It's very easy for me to read. It has a good aspectarian. It makes it faster. So I can give you more input than less if it's hard to read or hard to see, like so many of them are. And what will then happen is we'll go deeper with the tarot cards, and we will go, for instance, this is the deck I use. It's the Osho Zen Tarot deck, and it has these amazing cards. Let's see what's another. Oh yes, there's one. Wow, yeah, and also picking all the fires. What's that about?
Well, we were talking about nuclear war, so
Yeah, well, I guess that's it, isn't it? Yeah, like this, and yeah, they're wonderful cards. They were Mahadeva Padma did the artwork and was instructed by our mutual master Osho and how to do it. And just to give you an example, the suit of Pentacles, it's still rooted in the ancient tradition of tarot, but the foundation is, but with a different temple built on top of it. For instance, the Pentacles, which are usually in the suit of Pentacles, is about earth issues. That is called the suit of rainbows. It kind of takes it to another deeper spiritual version of what being grounded is. If you're exactly at the right place on terra firma, your feet on this ground, you're 120 degrees from the angle of the rain and the angle of the sun. You're the only one that can see the treasures, the rainbows of how it is to live in the moment. The eternity of the present then reveals its secrets to you effortlessly if you're here now. So the Pentacles becomes a true grounding and centering in the spirit. It's the very essence of the meditations that I was initiated in. That's also what I do as well. I share the meditations that Osho gave me, and I usually will release after the reading, if you want it, if you have a yes for it, a an email that has all the links and information so that you can get the meditation CDs and get, because there's music to it, read a couple of very important books. One's called the Meditation, the First and Last Freedom by Osho. It's instructions on the meditations. The other is the secret, the Book of Secrets is what it's called, and that is the 114 meditations of purported to have been written down by Lord Shiva in ancient Hindu times. And these are literally the basic meditations of the whole family of meditations, the core of every meditation that's out there. And there's 114 of them. And Osho speaks in discourse about them. So you can also get the audio version of that, and hear his silences between his words. And these meditations are things you can do during the day. One of my favorites was for 21 days. You always try each meditation for 21 days, let it go deep. And then after 21 days, you can go to another or stay with that one and add another or something. But to give you an example, you don't change anything that you're doing. You just simply watch yourself waking and sleeping. You watch yourself talking, thinking, feeling, going through your day, active, inactive, but you visualize yourself not having a head. For 21 days, you just go on as before, but you have no head. You picture yourself without one. It's very interesting what happens when you do that. You start living what the Zen masters hinted when they said in their koan, always remember, walk without feet, fly without wings. And then Osho added his, think without mind. You'll get it because if you have no head, our subtle attachment to our head being the center of everything, if you kind of remove it for 3 weeks, you will find your real center is not the head. It's closer to the heart. So that's just one of the 114. So, and it's there's a certain energy I put out that I've come to understand since I came back to private readings in 2018. I didn't read it for private readings for 26 years. It's had to stop at one point. The medium never opens and closes doors. One day the door was closed. And they're saying, well, will you ever go back to it again? I said, personally, I don't think so. But it's not the personal that does these things. So stay in touch, because if it happens again one day, it'll just be back. Did you know how the signs? I don't know anything. That's how it works. I don't try to know anything. No knowing is the state of the mediumship and the readings I do. So, that's so hopefully what'll happen is you'll see the link, and what you'll do is you through that link you write an email, and all you have to do is put Hogue reading, Hogue, Hogue reading, and on the subject line. If you want to write something, that's fine as well, but I will definitely see it in the hundreds of emails I get every day. I will see Hogue reading, and I know I just had 3 people today want to do it, so saw them in all the hundreds of things. Most of it's garbage, junk mail, but I keep everything open as I can, because otherwise I don't want any spam file taking your letters and saying, oh, we don't want to The machine decides that's an interesting letter or not. So this is how I can catch everything by kind of leaving it open. A lot of house cleaning every day, but it's the way it is. So yeah, so those are the two things, and I hope, and it's the same room. You'll see me just like you're seeing me now, and it'll be just one-on-one. And I take my talents of whatever they are, from reading the world to reading your world. And often what happens is people from all over the world come into this portal, and they have kind of the same equally unique issue. They're at a plateau in their spiritual search, and they just need some more tools. And it seems to be what this vibe I have is attracting. So not always, but mostly. So we'll have a great time.
Okay, so the audience, please click the link in the description of this video and all the videos I've done with John. And I'll take you to his website so you can sign up for the reading and sign up for the periodicals. For the ones that on Spaces, thank you for participating. And
Thank you.
yeah, and our next recording, which we'll be doing in about 2 weeks, we're going to take calls from Spaces. So please join us and have your questions. Now, before we close out, you have to say goodbye to everybody, and then I'll close out Spaces and also the Zoom.
Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, very good. So let me close the recording here.